tonight, so no pledge. And it's 7 o'clock, so let's get rolling. Everybody good with it?
Yep.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Winnetka Village Council study session for November 10th, 2020. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I ask everybody to mute your cell phones or iPads and everything else that might be causing a distraction. And please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to improve the sound quality of the meeting. And then Rob needs to do a roll call for attendance.
Okay. Trustee Kripe.
Yes.
Trustee Swerk.
Here.
Trustee Kaladarchi.
Here.
Trustee Dearborn.
Here.
Trustee Apatow.
Here.
Trustee Lampier.
Yes.
President Rintz.
Here. Public comment. Do we do public comment during study sessions? Okay.
Yes.
Kristen, is there anybody who has submitted public comment or who is in the audience who wishes to speak this evening?
President Rintz, there was no public comment submitted in writing in advance of the meeting, nor are there any members of the public in attendance at the Zoom meeting. So no public comment.
So Steve Saunders isn't lurking in the background tonight, huh? He'll be front and center very soon. Okay. Tonight is the second of 3 budget review sessions for the 2021 village budget. Public Works Director Steve Saunders will begin the review of the Public Works Department, and then we're going to jump over to Jim Bernal, who will be presenting engineering and the motor fuel tax budgets. And then David Schoen will finish up with community development and business district revitalization. If we start getting too late and people are getting tired, we could always punt the community development to the next meeting, but let's see if we can get through it tonight. So with all that said, I'll go ahead and just turn it over to Steve and let you start rolling.
Thank you. Good evening. I appreciate this opportunity to present my 24th and final Public Works budget. I'll be taking you through highlights of the Public Works, Refuse, Fleet Services, Sanitary Sewer, and Storm Sewer budgets. And we're going to start with Public Works, which is tab 9 in your budget books. Next slide. So the Public Works Department, we're primarily an operating department. We're outward facing, responsible for operations like refuse collection, roadway, right-of-way maintenance, snow removal, maintenance of the stormwater drainage and sanitary sewer systems. We maintain most of the public facilities, including the train stations that we lease from the Union Pacific, as well as the post office facility. And then we also serve internal customers in the fleet services area by maintaining the village's fleet of rolling stock. Next slide. This is the organizational chart. There are no operating changes, but you'll notice it looks a little bit different from last year because the engineering and forestry and GIS have been separated out into a separate department, as Jim Bernal will discuss later. Next slide. So this is a list of accomplishments in 2020. I think the thing that I'm most proud of my team was the ability to continue to provide services during the COVID-19 pandemic, really without missing much of a beat. We were able to continue construction projects. We were able to continue refuse collection and all of the infrastructure maintenance work that we have to do. I have to say I was very glad that we didn't have to face a heavy snowstorm because that would have been a challenge, but we were able to I think not miss a beat. So we completed our street and sidewalk rehabilitation programs, continued our forestry programs, our permit review programs, the streetscape construction, and we also were able to purchase a replacement sidewalk utility tractor. Next slide. In 2021, the goals that I will be leaving for my successor are to continue maintaining village streets, sidewalks, and alleys. One of the things that we want to do is complete the automation of snow route mapping, getting those loaded into GPS with turn-by-turn directions so that anybody can hop into any truck on any route and be able to perform the snow removal routes effectively. Complete the implementation of alternative liquid de-icing program and do our annual pavement patching program. We're going out for bid for a new landscaping contract. We want to complete tuck pointing of the cenotaph, which is one of the projects that we deferred because of the COVID financial impact, and continue our replacing of aging and faded signage. With the caveat that sometimes some of those signs just disappear rather than get replaced. If there's too many of them on a block face or something is confusing, we just pull the signs down. Every now and then they're missed and we have to put one back up, but usually we can get away with it. As well as we want to maintain our village fleet readiness, and we'll talk about separate goals in refuse collection and storm and sanitary sewer when we get to those funds. Next slide. Our capital program in the Public Works Department itself is pretty limited, just replacement of 2 pieces of equipment, an aging sidewalk utility tractor and an aging leaf vacuum for a total of $225,000. Next slide. This shows a financial summary of the Public Works Department. Unfortunately, it's a little bit hard to follow it because it reflects moving the forestry and engineering expenses out of Public Works into a separate fund. But the with those subtractions, the rest of the Public Works budget is pretty much status quo. We don't anticipate any personnel changes, no major new programs. And that is a quick summary of the operating section of the Public Works Department. If there's any questions just on Public Works operations, we can take those at this time.
Just jump in, everybody.
Steve, what about the capital? That's usually you have a few pieces of equipment that you're salivating over. Is that just because we're all done, or what? There's really no capital to speak of this year?
No, that's just the way that it falls out. We look at replacing equipment based on a schedule that takes into account hours, engine hours, or miles, depending on the piece of equipment, with then typically a kind of a maximum number of years of replacement. And we try to spread those out to avoid too many ups and downs. And this is what's up equipment wise for us in 2021. If you look out at out years in the capital plan, you see we've got some larger dump trucks and other pieces of equipment that flow through. But this just falls down at this level to a couple of pieces for this year.
Okay. Okay.
What's the appropriate time to, well, first of all, I just have a quick question about the de-icing. What are you all doing in lieu of salt?
So we use some liquid products. One is salt brine, which is winds up with a significant significantly less total poundage of salt per lane mile when it's applied as a liquid or as a pre-wetting agent.
Yep.
We also mix in something called beet heat, which is a proprietary blend that's salt brine mixed in with beet juice and some other non-salt components that's in a liquid, and that's primarily applied as a pre-wetting agent to the salt. When you pre-wet the salt, it tends to stick a little better and it activates faster because you don't need the traffic and the moisture on the roads to activate it. So
Right.
that allows you to spread less of it. So those are the main alternatives. And then we have limited places where we use something called calcium magnesium acetate, which is a very expensive material, but it's much less corrosive. So like the upper level of the parking deck and our bridge decks, rather than putting chloride products on, we use the CMA.
Got it. Oh, interesting. Okay. Thank you for that. And then the other question is talking about the capital plan for streets and sidewalks. Is that now or later?
That'll be in Jim Bernal's presentation.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, what accounts for the decline in services and supplies from 20 to 2021?
Moving over primarily the forestry operation.
Okay.
Their contractual work, as well as some of the smaller engineering contracts, moving that into a separate department.
Okay.
So like the tree trimming and tree removal contract, that's a couple $100,000, for example, just moving out of Public Works.
Steve, on that issue, and we could wait for Jim's, but when we look, if we put, Humpty Dumpty back together again, and it was the old department, is the department essentially spending about the same as the 2019 budget or the 2020 budget, I guess?
I anticipated that question. I have a handy.
I suspect you would.
piece of information here, and basically, if you add all the 6 areas of kind of what has previously been the Public Works family of funds, salaries and benefits, budget to budget is down 5.1%, and that reflects likely not refilling one refuse collector position. Across all of those, budget to budget, services and supplies is up 5.8%, which is about $250,000, and that's almost entirely attributable to in the refuse fund. If you happen to notice the significant increase in the recycling line, that's because our curbside recycling contract expires, and I put in some budgetary flexibility in case we wound up having to go out for bid rather than be able to exercise an extension with Lakeshore Recycling, because the market is completely different now than it was in 2015 when we bid the previous contract. Other than that, it's almost completely level budget to budget.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, Steve, looking at that though, but yeah, I'm sorry, you said, so there was because I'm looking at the engineering department, when you consolidate the services and supplies together with the Public Works, and it's 150,000, that's, you say, but the refuse fund is separate, so why would there be $150,000 more in combined cost and services with those two different departments over this past year's budgeted amount?
If I jump in, if you add in, I think the question is if you're looking at just the general fund,
Yeah.
and you add up what the Public Works general fund plus the Public Works engineering fund,
Right.
The total for the operating portion, the salaries and
Yep.
benefits and the services and supplies, looks like it's down about $135,000 this year versus the 2020 budget. And there's a little bit of a drop in the capital as well. And a lot of the capital items that were previously in the public works budget are now in the engineering.
Well, it says in the non-capital expenditures. Okay, that was what I was looking at. But anyway, I can figure that one out later. No worries. I'll dig down and figure it out. It's probably something pretty easy.
Other questions?
Okay.
Move along, Steve.
Okay, so we'll move on to the refuse fund, which is tab 14 of your book. This is one of the village's utility funds, and what basically distinguishes a utility fund from the general fund is that the utility funds are funded by charges for service. The general fund is much more reliant on taxes rather than service charges. So the refuse fund provides for all of our refuse, recycling, yard waste, and other solid waste programs, including residential refuse and curbside recycling, yard waste, our commercial and institutional customers, special refuse collections, the leaf collection program, the spring cleanup collection, and we also have the cost of maintaining and monitoring our closed landfill. Next slide. We were able to continue to provide refuse collection services uninterrupted during the pandemic, which again is a testament to the dedication of the people that actually perform that service day in and day out. We did shut down some of our drop-off recycling collection programs while the facility was closed when the state was in phase 2 and phase 3. But we've reopened all of those and we're able to continue to host those. There was a significant amount of pent-up demand, particularly for styrofoam recycling and electronics. But we kind of have been able to get through that. We completed the spring cleanup program, even though it was in July, and we were able to continue all the required groundwater monitoring and sampling for the closed landfill. Next slide. In 2021, we've got some ambitious goals to implement a modified pay-as-you-throw refuse program with a curbside collection option. So pay-as-you-throw is just what it sounds like. You pay based on how much refuse you throw out. Modified basically means that it's broken down to tiers based on container size. And then with that, we want to transition the current 4-day residential program to a 5-day program so that we can reduce some overtime expenses and improve supervisory coverage on the routes. We have budgetary flexibility to begin transitioning the commercial refuse collection program to private haulers. However, with the pandemic sort of sweeping up and the really kind of unpredictable business conditions, that may or may not happen in 2021. I think we'd want to be really careful not to add difficulty or confusion or just another thing for businesses to think about as they're coming out of the pandemic and trying to get back on their feet. But we do have the budgetary flexibility to do that. Our current curbside recycling contract with Lakeshore Recycling Services expires at the end of January 2021. So we have budgetary capacity to either bid or extend that contract. When we went into the initial contract with Lakeshore Recycling Services, our attorney Stu Weiss with then Holland and Knight negotiated a very favorable extension, favorable for the village. So we're in the process of working to implement that extension, which should help us significantly control our costs. And then we'll continue to work with the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County to host the various recycling events, the document destruction, electronics recycling, etc. The next slide, please. So this is a summary of the refuse fund. You'll see that salaries and benefits are showing a decrease, and that reflects the likely not refilling one refuse collector position once we transition to a curbside option. We anticipate a significant amount of penetration for that option, which should reduce the labor requirements associated with collecting and covering all of those routes. As I mentioned, you'll see that services and supplies are up significantly, and that is to allow for the potential of a significant increase on the recycling rate, although we think that we will not have to use that budgetary capacity. And then the capital outlay, you'll see that's a rebudgeting of $265,000 from 2020. And that's basically the cost of purchasing the carts for the required carts for the curbside collection program. So we're estimating 0 on that this year and just roll that over from year to year. Next slide, please. So a key initiative for our refuse service in 2021 is to transition to this modified pay-as-you-throw system. And this slide shows the proposed rates for the different service levels that we would intend to offer. The way that we built these rates was we figured out exactly how much revenue we need to raise to support the service. We used our current rate of $45 for once a week backdoor as kind of a starting point. And then we had surveyed the community, not the entire community, but a representative sample of the community to get a sense of how many people would pick each of these options. And then we extrapolated it out over our 4,000 customers to come up with these rates. So this allows for curbside customers to choose a 35-gallon, 65-gallon, or 95-gallon container at differential rates. It allows people, if they want, to continue their backdoor once per week or twice per week service. We would charge alley customers the same as a curbside rate. And then just for comparison, the current rate, which has been steady for 2 years, for once a week backdoor is $45 a month, twice a week backdoor is $95 a month. We would propose raising those by $5 a month, partly to keep up with cost increases and partly to send a little bit of a price signal to encourage people to go to curbside. We would, by timing, we would anticipate rolling this out in the second quarter of the year. I would want to make sure we get past kind of the snowbird timing, as well as the possibility of significant inclement weather. I wouldn't want to make a change of this magnitude when we're at the risk of, trying to deliver and change out containers in a snowstorm and things like that. So we would anticipate having this roll out probably in May, and then continue for the rest of the year. Next slide, please. With that, I mentioned that we plan to go to a 5-day-a-week service rather than 4 days. Right now, we serve residential refuse on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. The collectors work 4 10-hour days. And the routes are currently broken out kind of by those red dashed lines. If we went to 5-day service, that would even the routes out to make them much more even from one day to the next, reduce the possibility of overtime, increase coverage, and still allow us to do twice per week for those optional services and twice per week landscape waste services. And then we would work with Lakeshore Recycling to adjust their schedule. That's also in that cleverly negotiated contract that they have to match our collection schedule. So we would work with them to match that as well. Any questions on the refuse fund?
Yeah, I have one. I was trying to figure out, and I couldn't quite, break it out accurately. In terms of our charges for yard waste pickup, are we covering those expenses?
So we would still charge the sticker fees. And we don't have a real good way of figuring out how much of our costs are associated with yard waste collection because the guys do it on the same routes. So when they're out doing their routes, they're doing their once per weeks, their twice per weeks, and their yard waste. We're certainly raising enough to cover what we're paying Thielens to haul and compost.
Okay.
But it's hard to break out how much of a day they spend on yard waste versus second outs versus regular collection. So we sort of lump the costs together and lump the revenues together since it's all kind of one service. And we do, with this rate structure, we do raise enough revenue to cover our expenses.
Okay, because I was, I just wanted to make sure that we're at least covering the marginal costs relative to the tipping fees and stuff. And what about our volume and the cost of our tipping fees for, regular garbage? Is that pretty stable?
It is. The volume kind of fluctuates with the economy a little bit. And so there's not a lot of growth or change. Probably the biggest place that we have to, if we're serious about driving volume down, is if people take advantage of the food waste composting that we offer.
Yeah.
Because that food wet waste by weight is a not an insignificant component of our tipping fees.
That's a good thing to think about for the future. And then my last question is, can you talk a little bit about because recycling has changed so much in terms of the markets and stuff. It sounds like you're hoping just to renegotiate and keep it steady. But is for Lakeshore, given they have their own, their own facility, what's going on there? Do they have a market for their for the recycled plastics and stuff, or not? Or how's their business going?
That varies a lot. They wind up, I think, either stockpiling or landfilling a fair amount of that material. They are paying to get rid of it, even if if it's stuff that can recycle. Our contract from 2015, we started at $4.15 per house per month, something like that, with a recycling rebate of a certain amount per ton that's collected. Contracts now are in the 8 per house per month range with no rebate, just because of the changes that have taken place in the market. And we were able to include an extension, basically a 1-year extension at current terms. So that's what we're working with Lakeshore, hopefully to find a way to make that workable.
At current terms, at 4 point whatever, or at 8?
No, right now we're at 438 because
Okay.
of the CPI increase that was built into the contract. So there'd be a CPI adjustment on top of that, but otherwise at current terms.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
thanks.
That was my first question was how long was the extension? It looks like it's only a 1-year extension.
That's right.
Are we happy with their service?
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
they've been a really good partner with us. They're not perfect, just like our service isn't perfect. Every now and then there's a miss or things like that. But in terms of partnering with us on some of our initiatives, they've been very good.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't extend it more or try and do this before the extension hits? Why we wouldn't extend it for longer and having to be back in the spot and renegotiate in a year?
I think if we tried to extend it much longer, they gave us a number to kind of start those negotiations, and it was a shocking number. I'll leave it at that. The market has changed so much that
Right.
I'm not sure that simply renegotiating would be a better way for us to go than bidding the contract out and getting some competition just to keep everybody honest. I think what we would do, we do have the executive director of Swank is very helpful in kind of reading the market. They share data when new contracts are bid. And so when we get to probably the June timeframe, that would be the time to really discuss strategy, whether we want to try to negotiate some kind of extension at a mutually acceptable rate or simply go out and rebid the contract.
Do we bid with other communities around us to get more leverage?
The contract that we have now, we jointly bid with Glencoe. And then, so we jointly bid it and then sort of separated out. Glencoe's changed their service. They added in contractual collection for their residential as well. They used to have a Swank rate, but there's such a vast difference from community to community among the Swank communities that haulers weren't interested in bidding that way. So if there's an opportunity where there's another community that is also has an expiring contract, that might be something that we could take advantage of.
Yeah, so I was hoping on the pay as you throw, I'm just a little confused on how many people actually ask for twice a week. So I mean, what percentage do we know? Twice a week versus, well, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, so it's a small percentage. The twice a week fluctuates between about 7 and 8% by subscription of our customers.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand of economizing by doing special things. And I know on the sides of the bins, I know a lot of people use different bins. So I mean, for instance, I have 2, and 9 times or 15 times out of 16, I will go with 1 bin, but sometimes I have a lot of stuff and you go with 2. I'm not sure how you're charging and how it fluctuates. Are you going to ask how you even keep track of that?
Yeah, so the way that we would plan to do it was be by container size. So we would offer a 35-gallon container right now.
I got that part, but people have multiple. I may have 2 45s. I only use 1. 9 times out of 10, I use 2 sometimes.
Oh, sure. So for the backdoor service, we would continue doing it the way that we do now, which allows up to 2 37-gallon cans for $45 a month. It would be $50 a month under the proposed rate. And so if you have 2, you put out the 2. If this is one of the weeks that you don't have 2, you put out the 1. You're still billed the same. If you go to the curbside, then it's based on the container size that you have, and it's a monthly charge, whether you put it out every week or every other week.
The reason I asked that, because we can do a lot of complex things and no one really pays attention. You mess up people's garbage or you make it harder. I think this is one thing everybody gets annoyed with. So it just, as simple as it sounds, you really have to be very thoughtful about, and I know you are being that, but just want to make sure it's thought through. But thank you. That's all I got.
Yeah. What the key thing that I want to do is if somebody has once per week or twice per week backdoor service now, and they want to keep that, nothing is really going to change for them, except their rate's going to go up $5 a month. So they would still be able to opt for exactly the service that they have now. But if somebody wants to pay a little bit less and they don't mind dragging it out to the curb when they drag their recycling out, they would have options to do that.
Well, I guess that's my other question. If everyone has to have recycling, I assume it's cheaper if everyone dragged their garbage out to the curb?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if we had no backdoor option and we could just sort of zip up and down and collect the curbside, that would be a significant.
Would it be like recycling where you wouldn't need all those little vehicles that we have to pay for? Because recycling, they go right in the-
we would probably, if we forced everybody to curbside, we'd probably be able to get rid of the scooters. We might want to keep one just to get to some of the harder to service areas.
Okay.
But I'm not sure we're at the place of forcing everybody to go
No, for
curbside.
it. I got it. Thank you, though. That's it.
John?
Yeah, when we talked about the refuge program, just kind of filling Rob a little bit. One of the big things about our refuge program is that everyone loves it. And my big concern going through the whole process was let's not screw that up
Agreed.
and messing with people's garbage. You asked the one question for the $50, what size containers, that was addressed just now. My question is, I think to clarify, as far as containers, I look down my alley, people have all different containers. They got metal cans. I think this program, and clarify this maybe, Steve, is everyone's going to have to get a new Village of Winnetka container for what they contract with.
Yes, if you're on the alley or curbside, you would get a 35, 65, or 95 gallon cart. Backdoor, if you want to stick with metal cans or plastic cans or keep them in your little raccoon proof box or all the things that we deal with now, the people would be able to continue with that service. But anything that got pulled out to either the curb or the alley would be a consistent Winnetka container, just the way curbside recycling is now.
Right. In the back door, though, you would limit the quantity of garbage to approximately the 237 gallons, right?
Yep. And then if somebody has extra 1 week, they've got to buy a sticker and put it on an extra can or an extra bag, just like they do now. We want to provide an option for somebody that just says, I love everything the way it is right now. Can I keep it? The answer is yes.
Totally agree. Great. Thank you. That's all I had.
Hey, Steve, since you probably have more perspective on this than anyone, what's the long-term prognosis for the landfill where all our stuff is going? When do we fill that up? And are we looking at some point hitting a significant cost escalation on garbage service?
Boy, if I knew that, I'd be a rich man, but there's been projections actually going back to the 80s, which is one of the reasons that the Solid Waste Agency was formed. They actually purchased a quarry out in Bartlett. They were going to do a landfill out there. There was all sorts of environmental issues and lawsuits and all of that. So that part of the waste agency never came into fruition. But there's enough landfill capacity in the Chicago region in the Midwest for the medium term. You're not going to see a spike, maybe 10, 15 years out. But I think to the extent that people are much more conscious now in terms of what they try to recycle, and the next frontier is really trying to get people to recycle their food waste and compost that so that that's not being landfilled. So I think at least in the short and medium term, that's not out there. But long term, that's something we're always going to be with. We got to find space to bury stuff as long as we're burying it. And if we can find ways either not to generate the waste in the first place or to avoid burying it, that's better for everybody, regardless of how you look at it.
And where does our garbage go right now?
I think I'm actually not sure where Swank takes it to. I think some goes out west And some might make it across the state line into Wisconsin. But I'm not sure what arrangements Swank has for their ultimate disposal.
Okay.
Trustee Kripe, one of the benefits of Swank has been the establishment of the Glenview area transfer station, where the refuse can be aggregated and then transferred at a more efficient way, so that you have full loads going to wherever you need to go. So that transfer station is a pretty valuable asset. As Steve said, they didn't build their bale fill, but the transfer station is helpful. And then the way they track rates and consult with their member communities has been pretty helpful.
Okay. And just one last question on the cans for the curbside. Do we have any experience with squirrel proofing those things? I've come to find that they really like eating through plastic garbage lids.
There is a don't laugh. There is a bear-proof option that is a standard. There's at least maybe 10, 15 Western U.S. states that have to deal with bigger critters than squirrels. So there is a standard bear-proof option. There's also locking lids. As long as we're with plastic, though, just being honest, a determined rodent is going to be able to chew through anything other than metal, and we're not going to go to metal cans. That's not a feasible option. So the answer is sort of, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's just something we hadn't talked about when we originally talked about the curbside, that when COVID hit and we started wheeling our can down to the curb, we found some pretty large holes in the lid in a short amount of time because of the just amazing.
Yeah, I think we did, though, Andy, we did talk a little bit about the risk. Maybe it was in terms of unsightliness and so on, of people taking their cans out the night before.
Yeah, I was okay with
raccoons and all that.
Anticipate the plastic eating squirrels. It's
that
was an unforeseen risk on my part. That
yeah, they're out there.
We should inform the discussion moving forward.
But I think one of the risks of this plan is just how it makes the village look over time. If people take they're going out of town, whatever, they take their garbage can out 2 days before, and Mr. Raccoon gets it. I mean, we're going to have to see how this goes. Hey, Steve, on the revenue, sort of on, your assumptions on the usage, what kind of standard deviation or variance do you think could occur on that? I mean, it seems to me that your budget for 2021, you pretty much have, let's say, roughly 6 months of current cash flow that we pretty much know. And then we move on to this, expectation, if you will. I mean, and then 2022, we'll have knowledge. So we'll have a pretty good sense, but is this a conservative revenue estimate, or, what's our risk, do you think, in terms of your projections on what people do?
So the way I projected was, I basically looked at the results of the survey that we did to try to gauge people's preferences. And then I played around I built a spreadsheet model, put in the total revenue that we need to, and then played around with how the percentages of people picking different containers, would affect our bottom line. And unless we get a really large number of people taking the smallest container,
right,
then there's not a high degree of sensitivity on the revenue. We're not sending that big of a price signal, frankly. I mean, $9 a month for a community like Winnetka it's a real number, but it's not, it's a huge price signal. So somebody that's really determined to reduce their refuse bill would potentially want to pick the smallest container. But that was one of the things, the way that we built the budget, with enough cushion to maybe try to get 6 or so months of experience. I
Mhm.
didn't mention that we're gonna tag all the containers with RFID chips. So we'll be able to determine how many people are actually setting containers out, and how frequently we're dumping each container. So that'll give us some data too, to kind of adjust rates. The good news is that if the more people pick curbside, that also is going to help us control our expenses, because we don't have the time and the labor associated with the backdoor operation, which is really what takes the time, drives up the expense.
Can we do a
Um,
recommendation for that then? Can we say, we will give you have the option, but we, for our, we recommend going to the, curbside? I mean, I guess you still give the option, but it'd be nice to give them some direction if that's really is cheaper for us and easier.
Yeah, we could think through how we would want to word that and what the right balance between sort of pushing and giving people flexibility. I think what my thought was just one of the practical things is it's going to be a challenge getting everybody to respond with a container choice. And so my thought was that, hey, you're going to get this kind of container and curbside unless you get back to us. So that's one way that would kind of help, where we could kind of steer people's preferences, if you will, because we have to be able to plan for something.
I would think that with curbside, relative to making it successful, both from the residents and from the employee standpoint, is that the key is that they don't often have an extra container out there, because if you have an extra container out, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because it's not an automatically dumpable container,
Right.
correct?
Yeah, we don't have the equipment end of that. The containers would work for one of the Corrado carts, but we don't have on the equipment side the fully automated curbside trucks.
So, so they're just going to be dumping. It's going to be manually dumping at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Because the question is, what's going to be the price signal for an extra container? If it's not a lot, then people will be motivated to pick a smaller container, and then put out the extra container when they need it, rather than getting something that would be capacity. So I don't know if you've thought about that at all.
Yeah. So the way the refuse world works for curbside is, if it doesn't fit in your container, it goes out next week. You get one container, it goes out to the curb. And if you got garbage that doesn't fit in it, it goes out next week.
Then we'll have to be really clear with that communication, because yeah, because I can see where people would get upset. And the question alongside that is, how easy will it be for people to change out their size of container? Will that be pretty easy, or are they kind of married to the choice once they make it?
So we anticipate, just like when we rolled out the curbside recycling, we had a lot of people order the smaller containers. And then after a month or two realize, no, we need the bigger containers. And so we anticipate the same kind of thing for probably the first maybe 3-4 months of the program, that we're going to be swapping out a lot of the containers.
Okay. Okay.
So when we place our container order, we're going to have some buffer and cushion. If people, that's one of the things, I suppose, people made an estimate that, hey, I can get by with a 35-gallon container, but when they actually have it and they put it out for a month and they realize how big a bag of garbage is or whatever, that we anticipate a fair amount of switching back and forth
Okay.
initially.
Good. Okay. Just want to make sure that we're.
Yeah, I know we're probably getting way beyond the whole budget talk here. But one thing that never came up during our discussions on refuge is the week that this goes into effect, how do you get rid of the 3,000 existing garbage cans?
We did talk about that.
Did we? I don't, maybe I missed that.
No, we
Okay.
talked about it at staff level. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we'll take them away as refuse if
Those
people put-
squirrel bitten
Yeah.
cans.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry to
Okay.
add to that.
I've been holding on to a really ugly one that needs to go away pretty soon.
Steve, can I just, I'm sorry to dwell on this revenue thing, but what's the expense side of this? You say that, you know, if more people do curbside, we can adjust labor, more people do backdoor, we have to have more labor. I mean, are you able to, I mean, is 2021 likely to be a bit of a surprise one way or another in this budget? I mean, it seems to me that the expense side is probably more ascertained right now than the revenue side.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. We have the data that we have
Yeah.
based on the survey, and that's the best data that we can work on now. Is that going to be exactly right? No. But I don't anticipate it's going to be drastically off. And then we'll have some time to sort of react to it.
But if you have more backdoor service, are you able to, and I don't know what that means in terms of labor content, you know, how you do that on the fly. Are you able to adjust for that if you have more backdoor than you're expecting?
Yeah, we could, so this 5-day program, in a pinch, I mean, if it was 70% backdoor, we could still get the work done. We would
Okay.
probably have to refill the vacant position to do that.
Right, okay,
But we could still get the work done because we visit every back door as it is now. So we can get the work done, and the revenue works at $45 or proposed $50 per house per month. And so if a huge percent of the village opts for backdoor, the expense and the revenue will balance. I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think probably the biggest risk point is if a huge percentage take the small container, because we've got fixed costs. It costs what it costs to drop it off at the transfer station, regardless of what size container it comes in, and we've got other fixed costs like that. So there's some risk there, but the way that we've built the budget and kind of transitioning partway through the year will help us be able to, effectively respond to that risk with the 2022 budget.
well, aside from the budget, this initiative here is probably, you know, the number one that's going to touch residents in 2021. I mean, you know, and so the rollout and all obviously is going to be mission critical. You know, because as Rob said, or someone said, you know, or John's work, you know, people love their garbage pickup.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah, we want to be able to communicate clearly, early, and be very responsive and adaptive to the requests from residents that start to come in. For, as Trustee Lanfear noted, if there's a change of container, we're going to do our best to accommodate all the way through the transition year. Steve made the point that our staffing is scaled to where we are right now for the most part. So whatever comes out of the subscription program, we should be good to go for this year, and then we can adjust in the future years.
Right.
But I do think that the way we looked at the survey results and extrapolating, I think it's a pretty good estimate as to how things are going to shake out. But there will be some adjustments as we get into 22.
Yep.
Okay, can we move on?
Certainly.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, so this one should be a little quicker. This starts in tab 16,
Right.
Which has several funds in it. So page 352. The fleet services is an internal service fund for maintaining motorized equipment. Basically, we track our costs by vehicle and then aggregate them up by department, and then bill back the user departments based on the actual cost of operating and maintaining their specific vehicles. So in 2020, despite being down one mechanic for the year due to the COVID hiring freeze, we still were year to date have been able to complete almost 1,300 vehicle service tickets to minimize downtime and keep the vehicles on the street. We also wrote the specs and purchased the sidewalk utility tractor. Next slide. This is pretty much a stable budget. So we're going to continue to repair the fleet. We have two new mechanics. Because of a retirement and a promotion, we have one new mechanic starting next week, and then another mechanic starting hopefully shortly. So it'll be a training year as well. So those mechanics will be hopefully achieving their ASE and emergency vehicle technician certification, and then continuing maintaining the village's vehicle fleet. It's a carry forward budget really with no significant changes. Questions on fleet services?
Nope.
All right. Sanitary sewers. That's tab 13 of your book. We maintain the village's sanitary sewer system, which contains almost 247,000 lineal feet of sewer main, over 1,100 manholes in one lift station. So we do annual video and cleaning and maintenance of the system on roughly a 7-ish year cycle. We performed over 30 residential inspections for flood protection assistance when people get basement backups or flooding in basement after rains. We'll go out and kind of walk through their system, make sure that whatever they can do to kind of keep water from coming in through window wells or backing up through sewers, things like that. We offer assistance to help people help themselves. We continue to go through and eliminate cross connections that allow contamination from the sanitary system to the storm sewer system. And we have a fairly robust trenchless lining program where we insert a structural liner into existing pipes to extend their life without having to dig up and replace the pipe. Next slide. In 2021, we'll continue the high and medium repairs that we identified in a 2018 sewer evaluation, continuing our annual cleaning and video inspection. We do a root intrusion foaming. It's a chemical foam that goes into the sewer system that basically dissolves roots in some kind of critical sections of pipe that go through like backyard easements and things where there's a lot of tree roots. And then we'll continue to identify any cross connections and work with property owners to reduce infiltration and inflow and basement backups. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the sanitary sewer fund. You'll see there's some minor operating reductions, primarily in salaries and benefits that reflects reallocating salaries from the sewer fund to the stormwater fund to make the personnel allocation between those funds more even. So a total fund expense of about a 3% decrease budget over budget. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the 2018 study. We looked at 2 of our main basins in town, shown in yellow and pink, and identified nearly $3.3 million of total repairs. We've been working on the critical, high, and medium priority repairs and built those into our capital improvements program for the 5-year program, and are working that as a pay-as-you-go. So the next slide shows that 5-year program, and you'll see that we've got about $400,000 in 21 and another $400,000 in 22 to finish up those high and medium repairs from that study, with the anticipation that the remaining system, primarily north of Tower Road, would get a detailed investigation in 2023. And then we've just sort of seeded the fund with some budget capacity in 24 and 25 to start with any critical repairs that are identified in the 2023 study. And the point that I want to kind of focus on is that this is all being done pay as you go with the sewer rates that we have. And then that allows some cash reserves in the fund to go back to the medium priority repairs in the out years, whatever we identify in the 2023 study that we won't get till 26, 27 and beyond. We'll have sufficient cash in the fund to address those without having to increase rates in the future to address the capital. Next slide. So this is a sewer rate comparison with most of our nearest neighbors. You'll see the rates vary significantly from the rate resolutions. I transposed them all to the units in which we bill, which is a rate per 1,000 cubic feet of water usage. And so you'll see the rates vary from about $8.70 per 1,000 cubic feet up to over $48 per 1,000 cubic feet. And we're numerically right in the middle and kind of below average, I guess, if you were to take an arithmetic average with our sewer rates. Any questions on the sanitary sewer fund?
Yeah, why is there such a massive swing in those costs, the charges?
So that, I guess that depends on whether you're doing pay as you go or bonding. I know Deerfield has a section of town that they have their own treatment plant for, and they made some significant improvements to the treatment plant, and then they have a principal and interest payment for that. I think that explains Wilmette's number as well.
Got it. Got it. How are things going relative to inflow and infiltration? Are the estimates that we made pretty good, or are we running into problems? How's that going?
We're continuing to make progress, primarily with lining and manhole replacement, because those are the lowest hanging fruit.
Right.
Those prices have been stable for a long time. So we've got pretty good estimates on those. I really am not sure what we're going to find when we do the detailed evaluation of the rest of the town in 2023. So those numbers might be off a little bit looking forward, but we do have by that time enough of a cash cushion in the fund that if they are off a little bit, we'll be able to accommodate that.
Okay, and this was a pretty dry year, right? I was gone for a lot, but we didn't have a ton of water problems that would have resulted in a lot of infiltration into the sanitary sewer system, right?
No,
Yeah.
This was at least it was a very wet May, and then after that it was on the historically dry side.
Got it. Okay, great. Those are my questions.
Okay.
All right. Drum roll, please. Okay.
All right. Save
The main event, tab 15 of your budget book. So the stormwater fund provides for both capital and operating and maintenance for all of our stormwater management activities. This again is a utility fund, so the revenues come from the stormwater utility fee, and then any sort of capital revenue infusions from grants or future bond issuances or transfers or the like. Next slide, please. So 2020 was a year of negotiations and accomplishments. I had hoped that we'd be under construction on some of this, but we completed intergovernmental agreements with the Park District and School District 36 to basically get all of our storage projects covered by agreements so that we can go back to the Forest Preserve. And we have begun detailed design engineering and preparation for permitting for the Cook County Stormwater Wetland Project. We also completed a number of smaller system repairs that we found during our regular cleaning and video inspection, and we completed construction of the Bull Parkway pump station project. Next slide. In 2021, we anticipate completing the engineering and permitting for the Cook County Forest Preserve project. We're on schedule to complete that work in September of 21 so that we can bid the project out in the fall and start construction in the winter. We're proposing funding in the budget to begin detailed design engineering for the first portion of the Duke Childs Field and Skokie Playfield storage and conveyance projects. We've built funding into the budget to begin a similar stormwater alternative study like we did for Western Winnetka, but for the basins on the east side of town that have kind of been waiting their turn, as well as just continuing cleaning and maintenance operations of storm sewer catch basins, our stormwater pump stations, ditches, et cetera. And then we've got some repairs to the existing storm sewer on Bull Parkway that feeds into the pump station. And then an emerging project that came to light with significantly rising lake levels and the heavy storms that we had in January and February. We've got an erosion control project at the Willow Road street end where the two storm sewer systems discharge to Lake Michigan built into the 2021 budget. Next slide. So this is a financial summary of the stormwater fund. You'll see that overall, the total fund expense is decreasing. The salaries and benefits, as I mentioned when we were talking about the sanitary sewer fund, that reflects moving some of the salaries into the stormwater fund to kind of even the distribution of our sewer crews and engineering staff between the two funds. And then a slight decrease in debt service based on the bond schedules. Next
Yay.
slide, please. So this is the current stormwater vision program. So it shows the stormwater storage projects at the Forest Preserve, Crow Island School there in yellow, and then Duke Childs Field and the two golf course projects. And then a network of larger storm sewers to feed water into those storage facilities. So the green pipe run is basically taking the water from Willow Road, from the south area of Willow Road, running it through the Crow Island storage facility for storage as well as water quality treatment, and then discharging it to the Forest Preserve. And then the remainder of the pipe, the blue is the initial phases for what we've been calling the tree streets. to take the water from those areas that are most prone to flooding during real heavy rainstorms and getting the water out of the neighborhoods and into the storage areas. And then the red pipes are the later phases to get the water from the upstream areas through the pipe network into the storage areas. So that is kind of the way that the vision lays out. Next slide, please. So this shows the project estimates and how we've layered them into the 5-year capital program. So the vision projects that are proposed in 2021 are design and starting construction of the Forest Preserve Wetland Project, and then doing design engineering for the storage projects on Duke Childs Field and Little Duke Childs Field, as well as the Park District storage projects on the par 3 and the 18-hole golf course. And then working out into the future years, the conveyance through the tree streets to get the water into the storage areas, the areas south of Willow Road around Crow Island School and upstream of there. And then those upstream projects that were shown in red. And then we've broken out as a separate line item each of the conveyance projects. We've also anticipate wherever we can doing things like bioswales and permeable pavements and other green infrastructure type items that would serve as both water quality improvement, but also sort of alternative storage projects. So we've broken that out as a separate line item. And if you do all the math for the full program, the total cost is just under $76 million. And the next slide. And this is very roughly how we would potentially be able to fund that. This is all subject to discussions that'll take place at the special council meeting on the 23rd. But if we start with $75 million of projects, we've got reserves in the stormwater fund. We've got grant funding that our state legislators have been able to direct our way to the tune of about $28 million out of the state capital bill. We have a grant that we secured from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for $500,000. And we'll talk more about the additional bonding capacity that's available without changing the ERU rate, possibly transferring funds from the general fund, and then some other options for the remaining 9.2 million. So that is kind of the stormwater vision. We do have some other capital projects in the fund. Next slide. So we've got erosion improvements at the Willow Road street end, estimated at $600,000. I think it's probably going to be a little less than that. That consists of rebuilding the village's storm sewer that goes down from the top of the bluff to the bottom, and then armoring the full bluff with armor stone revetment. I mentioned the stormwater modeling and alternative study for East Winnetka, estimated that at $180,000. Mitigation zone improvements. If you recall, when we did the West Winnetka study, there are some areas that are kind of isolated and not really connected to where the larger flooding areas are. But there's still issues in those small areas that we're calling those mitigation zones. So we've got $50,000 that we could direct towards that. And then I mentioned the repairs to the Bull Parkway storm sewer. We're going to line that trenchlessly for an estimated $100,000. And that completes the stormwater fund, unless there are any questions.
Steve, I just want to say thank you. I know this is your last budget meeting, and for anyone who does watch this, they can see that slide that you put up breaking down the solution to a more than 100-year problem and not understand how much of your effort and sweat and tears and everything has gone into that. So my question for you is, what part of the stormwater system would you like named after you?
I love golf, so I wouldn't mind a plaque out there
Oh.
on the 18th hole somewhere over by the edge of the trees. That would work just fine for me.
I think,
Not
think
the
we can
clean out
rename-
tank under Duke Childs.
No, no.
Just a plaque or a whole pond?
the 18th tee, I think might need a little bit of something.
Oh my God, that's such a great idea. That is such a great idea.
Thank you for-
Let's get it built and make sure it works first.
But you know what? Maybe what we could do, we could sell naming rights. I mean, you know, John Oliver bought naming rights to, you know, a sewer treatment plant in Connecticut. So we never know. I mean, maybe people will want to purchase bits and pieces of this and put their name on it. I don't know.
Well, Steve, this project is like the sewer stormwater projects like Hotel California. You can check out, you think you're checking out, but you can never leave. So sorry.
My face will be around.
Oh my God.
No,
It's
and
pretty amazing we've gotten to this point, and, you know, and it makes sense. And we're looking at it and we're going, yeah, that's the way it's going to work, rather than hair on fire. And oh my God, this is just, you know, where are we? So thank you for all of your years to this. Boy.
I do have a couple questions, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. One is, I see the budget, and I think some of the massive problems that came with the last attempt at this was 40 turned into 70, turned into over 100.
Right.
And that is not a legacy any of us want, and at least I don't. And I'm just trying to figure out what's the reality of this. Are there ways to chunk this out? Is everything in this, Steve, interconnected? So if we feel we're really $10 million short, does doing 75% of this take care of 80% of the flooding problem? I'm trying to understand truly what if you piece this out, if you do 75% of this work, does 90% of the flooding go away, or 70% of the flooding go away, or 20% of the flooding go away? I'm just trying to get a reality check here.
Yeah, I think if you were to try to piece it out, if you built all of the storage and then started with the conveyance in the tree streets and all of the south of Willow, you would get most of your flooding. And then the upstream pieces are important because you need to get water out of those neighborhoods as well. But those are areas that you can build in kind of as we're redoing streets, because as the farther up you get, the smaller the pipe has to be. And at some point it can be part of a street rehabilitation project if you're down to 36-inch pipe instead of 5x12 box culvert. And so we've built those costs into this, but the
Could you back up that slide, which parcels it out, and just kind of, so I can look at what you're talking about when you say it.
Yeah. So so that would be,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you basically went from your south of Willow conveyance up, that gets the worst areas of town. And then, I mean, now you maybe another 2 million to add the Hibbard North conveyance. So you're at something like, instead of $75 million with all of that, you're in the $60 to $65 million range.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. Because
But
just trying.
it's not as if we can make those main parts smaller. We can't do that. We've got to commit to, you know, sizing it correctly, because that's going to create nothing but problems if we are insufficient in the main portion of the project, right?
Yeah, if the water can't flow through the pipes, it's going to flow over the ground or stay where it falls.
Right.
And the whole point of this is to get the water into those storage areas. I will say that if you don't build the storage areas, you don't have a project. I mean,
Right.
that's because then the water stays in the neighborhoods, regardless of how big a pipe you put in. You
Yeah.
gotta
Yep.
have a place to move it out of the neighborhood. So that's why I phased it this way, as we start at the very bottom of the system, build the storage, and then work your way up into the upstream areas with the pipes to get the water to the storage areas.
And we'll get into a lot more of the costing methodology on the 23rd, because there's a lot more behind this than anything you saw during the tunnel exercise. And we've
Thankfully.
you know, we've burned up probably the better part of a year validating a lot of the cost assumptions that in order to make sure that we could have meaningful finance discussions on the project with some confidence that the number we were talking about would be close to real. So
Yep.
a lot of this you'll get a really deep dive on it on the 23rd as well.
I would not say that burning up a year would be an appropriate conversation. That you have a year well spent, I think is better, because that was really important.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to, go ahead. Sorry. I just want to say thanks to Steve too for all his work. I've been with Winnetka now 17 years, and Steve will probably remember when we first met with my basement flooded and how upset I was. And I was committed from that day forward, I think, to really get this thing off the ground. So.
Yep.
Yep.
I think
All
the
right,
other
thanks,
beautiful
thanks.
thing about this project, Steve, is, the tunnel, people were willing to pay money to oppose. And if you look at what we're going to be talking about in that slide you had, we've got $28 million being given to us because this is the right kind of thing for us to be doing. And
Exactly.
it's huge.
Bravo.
Yeah.
I have to ask, is this Bull Parkway? Are we done with Bull Parkway after this?
Yes. Yes.
Bull Parkway has gotten more attention than any place else in the
I want a
village, right?
special assessment for Bull Parkway.
In the last year.
God.
Steve, I want to thank you. Good work.
Thank you.
I know we got a lot to do on the 23rd, so we'll
Yep.
save a lot of our powder for that. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Terrific.
All right.
Other questions? Okay, well, Steve, next.
Next is Mr. Bernal.
Chicken.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks,
Can you
Steve.
hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear-
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, President Rintz and the council members. I'm pleased to present the first budget presentation. That was Steve's last. This is my first for the newly formed engineering department. The pages we'll be talking about are in tab 9 of your book. They're pages 169 to 185. As Steve mentioned, although the engineering division has historically been part of the Public Works Department, the engineering department was formed in consideration of the upcoming and significant stormwater management and flood mitigation construction projects, as well as the village's streetscape improvement projects, all important together. The goal of the engineering department, it's going to be to help centralize these multi-year design and construction efforts. Again, this is in addition to the normal engineering and forestry division activities, which we'll get into in a little bit. With that, let's take a look at some of the details of the department. So the next few slides will provide an overview of the engineering division department roles and responsibilities. We'll be continuing to look to develop, update, and implement and provide project management and oversight of our capital and MFT projects, including the management of the multi-year stormwater and flood mitigation projects, which we just talked about. We'll continue to prepare those engineering plans and specification and coordinate the bidding of the construction municipal projects and review the bids, and then of course present them to council for approval. We'll be supervising inspection of public improvements and private construction projects, including the review and approval of change orders for on-site modifications that may occur with those projects. We'll look to execute and manage the annual construction programs, which most of you are familiar with. This includes our road rehabilitation program, our sidewalk replacement program, pavement patching throughout town, and of course updating of our striping. We'll continue to oversee the village's participation in the community rating system. This is that CRS system through a program through FEMA. Our participation provides a decrease in cost for homeowners that have to pay for flood insurance in the floodplain. So that program has been very successful for us. We'll receive and respond to resident inquiries and concerns throughout the year regarding construction, planning, and design of the public projects. That's just part of what we do. With the forming of the engineering department, GIS has been moved over into there as well. So we'll be managing the GIS program throughout the village, and as well as the village forestry division, now part of the engineering department. That will include their annual tree planting, tree trimming, commercial plantings and maintenance, and of course, private inspections. Next slide. So this slide shows the organizational chart of the engineering department. This department is comprised of 5.5 full-time employees, comprising of the engineering and forestry divisions, and a shared public works analyst that helps us out. This also includes 2 summer interns, one in the forestry department and one in the engineering division, contractual engineering services as we need them, and a part-time GIS operator, which currently comes every Thursday, Friday. Next slide. So next we'll talk about some of our goals and objectives for the engineering department in 2021. We'll be looking to implement the fiscal year capital improvement program. Again, this includes the design and construction of our annual street rehabilitation and MFT resurfacing projects. We'll be looking to complete the Birch and Pine Street parking lot reconstruction project. This is similar to the Spruce and Birch parking lot. We'll be reconstructing it, making it out of concrete, adding the permeable pavers for water quality. And then, of course, we'll be looking to also just do our general maintenance on our roadway infrastructure. On average, we typically replace about 11,300 linear feet of curb and about 20,000 square feet of sidewalk. So we'll also be looking here to continue to enhance and improve our forestry and landscaping initiatives throughout the village. We'll be, again, looking to remove and replace, on average, about 175 diseased, dying, or hazardous trees, and pruning on average about 1,500 trees. We'll be looking to continue to enhance the perennial landscaping improvements in the commercial district and village-owned open spaces and parkways. This relates more to the streetscape project, where we have our new open planting areas. We're looking to enhance those with perennials. So they'll come up every year and they get bigger and double in size. And of course, we'll be looking to provide our standard engineering permit review, design, and code enforcement investigation. Right. So this slide here, this represents the roadway rehabilitation program that we have. And I want to talk just briefly about it, as it's one of our larger capital projects. So in 2021, we budgeted approximately $1.57 million for this. And as we formulate this program, I want to talk a little bit about how we do it. So the first thing we do is evaluate the roadways. We identify those current pavement conditions throughout town. That includes visual inspections. And we utilize a non-destructive, non-invasive roadway testing program, which you've heard about in the past a little bit. It comes from Infrastructure Management System, IMS. And we test the roadways about every 4 to 5 years, depending on the severity of the winter weathers. We're up for another evaluation of the roadways in 2022. We use the information of the roadways. It tells us how the different layers of the asphalt or concrete are managing, what's the subgrade of them, how long they'll last, and it helps us to determine which methodology to use, whether we resurface the roadway or do a total reconstruct. Some of the complications that we encounter as we're developing our program is making sure that we coordinate with other capital programs. We don't want to do a resurfacing of a roadway and then come back 2 years later and then rip up the roadway. So we try to coordinate as best we can with that. We try to be fiscally conservative as we do these programs. This includes integrating with our water department. All the roadways that are proposed for this year's program have some form or fashion of water in them, whether it's a replacement of a water main or water services. So this year is being very highly coordinated with the water department. We also take into account the effects of multiple new building construction projects. We take a look at a roadway, and if I know that there's a lot of homes under construction that have to dig within that roadway, we try to postpone it for a year if we can, because we don't want to resurface and have the patchwork that we're also familiar with from those projects. And then, of course, we take into account unusual severe weather patterns. If we have a very bad winter, a lot of times roads that may appear good in one season can quickly deteriorate fast with potholes and things. So we try to take that into consideration. As we prepare our cost estimates, we utilize, on average, actual costs from rehabilitation programs that we've developed, as well as neighboring communities. And then we take into account any kind of estimated inflation, typically 2 to 3%, depending on how the seasons are going. Next slide. So this slide here, this map shows all the proposed roadway locations to be rehabilitated in 2021, as well as the Pine and Birch parking lot. As you can see, we've got some larger projects on the north end and the south end. And then we've got some resurfacing work and reconstruction near the central area. Near Newcher High School, we're going to be rebuilding replacing an old water main with a new one, and then reconstructing the roads down there. That work will primarily take place during the summer months, so we can avoid next slide. So this slide here provides us a cost estimate of that project, our annual street project for this year. We've estimated, and I'll way back up. So this list is all the locations that we'll be doing roadway resurfacing or reconstruction on, including the Pine and Birch parking lot. And then we've got some various patching, striping, repairs throughout the town as well. The roadway costs for this program are about $1.55 million, roughly this year. And the water main work that's associated with those locations is a little less than 1.8 million right now. Our total project cost is about 3.35 million for this year. So it's a pretty robust program. Some of these streets will look familiar from last year. Due to COVID, a lot of the roadway work that was associated with water main got delayed because of COVID. We stopped that. So those roads that we didn't complete as part of this year's 2020 street rehab program are getting rolled into 2021. And we added 2 additional locations. One of them was Birch Street. Anybody recalls the large 20-inch water main that burst on there? It was quite destructive. We'll be looking to replace that water main and then replacing some water services up on Scotts Avenue. So those are the 2 additional ones this year's program. Next slide. So because this is the first year of the department, this slide provides kind of a breakdown of the estimated cost of the department in 2021. Salaries, as Steve talked about, these are salaries that were pulled from other components to the engineering division. They make up roughly a little over $508,000. Service and supplies are estimated around a little less than $550,000. And those include things such as engineering consulting services, GIS costs, technology, licensing, training, annual testing services for our roadways, for materials. This also includes the Forestry Department's operating budget, which is separately in part of the Public Works Department, as Steve noted. And that includes their operating budget with the key items being tree trimmings, planting, disease control, and supplies. And then finally, the capital outlay. This was proposed at a little over $1.88 million. These costs primarily includes $150,000 that we earmarked for new sidewalk construction and maintenance, the reconstruction of the Pine and Birch parking lot, the annual street rehabilitation program, a repair to the portion of the Lincoln Avenue parking lot. There's erosion issue on the side that we'll be taking a look at, and then supplemental roadway patching throughout the year, and that can depend on our weather conditions. So overall, we're looking at a total department budget of a little less than $3 million. And again, most of those costs have been pulled out from Public Works to form the new department. Next slide. So I've got just a couple slides here talking about motor fuel tax. If you'll indulge me, I'll finish these up real quick, and then I can answer any questions that you have. So the MFT funds, this is a tax from the state of Illinois for the privilege of operating motor vehicles on public highways and operating recreational watercrafts on the waters of Illinois. Excuse me. The tax is based on the purchase of motor fuel. A percentage of the funds that are collected are distributed to local agencies to fund critical transportation infrastructure projects, and other MFT eligible expenses. Our accomplishments here for 2020 for this fund include the resurfacing of 5 residential streets utilizing MFT funds. As you may recall, this was done at the request of the council in 2019. Staff was asked to try to utilize a portion of those available funds that we had as part of our capital projects as well. For 2021, staff again will be proposing to use about $300,000 of our available MFT funds to resurface, to reconstruct Birch Road between Willow and Elm. This will take place after the installation of the new water main, which I noted previously. We're going to be rehabilitating the total roadway all the way throughout. It's going to be quite an extensive project, but we're going to hope to build it quickly in phases. So some of our, that was it, sorry, next slide. So this slide here shows the financial summary of the village's MFT funds. As you can see, due to the effects of COVID and the reduction of travel within the state, the net operating income is showing a reduction of approximately 19.4%. They're critical under capital expenses for the next year. This includes the $300,000 that we had talked about to be used for the resurfacing and reconstruction of Birch Street. And then the final invoicing from the state for the village's share of the construction costs for the Oak and Cherry Street Bridge project. So primarily, those are going to be our major capital costs. It's really paying our bills from last year, and then the resurfacing of the roadway. So with that, that is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
I have a question. My pet project is completing the sidewalk network in the village, and it's, you know, a long range capital project. It's on, I know it's on page 423 of the capital improvement plan book. What is the plan for completing the sidewalk network?
So as we take a look at the roadways, if there's any sections of roadways that we're doing complete reconstruction on, we typically try to complete that map. I know there's a map that shows all the locations where there are existing sections that are missing. So as we begin to work on those roadways, we will plan accordingly to either install and make sure we've got the space to install those sidewalks at that time.
So, you know, previously, the policy had been that, you know, the people on the streets, more than 50% have to approve it. Are we just planning on moving ahead, or what's the policy around that?
So we would continue to follow the same policy that we have in the past. A recent example that some of you might recall is on Locust Street. There were some residents just south of Hill that had requested the installation of the sidewalk. We had worked with the Cook County Department of Transportation on it, reached out to the residents based on interest. Based on that interest, they did not want to move forward at this time. They didn't meet the criteria for the installation of the sidewalk. So they decided they were going to talk amongst themselves and then circle back with us in regards to the project.
You know, I don't know where or when the appropriate time to take up the consideration of the policy, but I have to say, over time, I'm more and more concerned about that policy. Like today, for example, I was driving down Locust Road, you know, that portion we were talking about. There were 5 different people walking on both sides of the street, on the street. You know, that's a high trafficked area. You know, we don't have sidewalks behind our schools. I worry about the safety of our residents, and until somebody gets hit, I really don't, I don't believe that we have the right policy. I would really like us to take a more proactive, you know, and go ahead and when a street comes up for reconstruction, construct a new sidewalk if there isn't one there. We can notify people in advance, you know, go ahead and send notifications out now, you know, be aware. You know, it is our property, and we are responsible for the safety of our people. I just, you know, I've had a very hard time and I've sat on it for a long time, but before I leave the council, I would really like to have a serious conversation about being more aggressive with our sidewalk replacement or, placement policy. It's not replacing, it's installing.
Sure.
Do we have like a way of ranking kind of from a safety perspective and prioritizing from a safety perspective where there are not sidewalks? Like if it's a busy street and there's not a sidewalk on either side of the street, that seems to me like priority number 1, right?
Right.
Priority number 20 might be a not busy street where there's already a sidewalk on one side, in which case it's like, well, just go.
Yeah, right.
So is it
That's
possible?
that's absolutely something we can look into. We can take a look at the list of sidewalk locations that we have and then try to rank them. We take a look at considerations such as what existing, I'll use Locust as an example because that was one of the hardest ones, is to meet the criteria for Cook County. You had to be a certain distance back. And that meant encroaching onto people's property where they currently had vegetation, trees, utility poles. It's kind of maneuvering around what was out there. And that's where we ran into, I think that's where the residents couldn't agree. Some were okay because there wasn't conflict, some there were. So I think that was that's the biggest hurdle that we face.
Was that on their property or was it on the parkway?
No, it's some of that's a combination of parkway and the right of way that's through there.
Okay, I mean, typically we're talking about Village Parkway, but people just have taken it on as their own. I mentioned to Rob that a place to start is that when people purchase a piece of property that doesn't have a sidewalk on it, to inform them that, be aware that a portion of what you think might be your property is actually village property, and it, may be used in the future for village purposes, and, not to be surprised by it. I think that's been part of the problem, is that people have developed it on their own with the expectation that it will always be there for them to use. So, maybe we can sort of take a proactive.
Sure, yeah. We can take a look at it and I can work with staff and we'll try to prioritize, at least put something together so we can take a look and see what obstacles may be out there for each section too.
Okay.
Jim,
Great.
I know, I thought I've seen you have a map where the gaps are, right? And that's probably the place to start. And then with the prioritization along where the gaps are existing.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
and
I think what we'll do is certainly this is study session material for sure.
Yep.
So I'll ask Rob to move that onto the list. And then when we get together in January to kind of set the agenda for the loose spots in the schedule, make sure to bring this up again so we can get it forced through and at least get the conversation started. I think Jim knows what we need as far as just presentation documents to have the conversation, but I'll try to get it on a study session. As you know, it's been so hard to talk about anything.
Of course, right. I just didn't want it to get lost. Thank you very much.
But regretfully, we're gonna have to get used to it and figure out a way to get some work done while we're sitting on this silly computer screen. So I hear you loud and clear, and I'll make sure it happens.
Terrific.
you're on mute, Rob.
Any other questions for Jim?
Rob is trying to talk, but he's on mute.
Oh, sorry.
I did raise my hand like class. I had a quick question on the roads. When you guys do these beautiful jobs like on Westmore where it's paved and it's gorgeous, and then construction happens and they just chow into the street and do a real half-assed job of repairing it. Can we hold builders to higher standards because you have these roads we spend all this money on, then builders come, whack it out, and they just do a patch job, and the road, it just starts to chip away and go to hell. So I didn't know if there are standards we hold builders to, if there's, it looks okay for 2 months and it kind of sinks, and I just don't know how we protect our streets from all the building and hold people to higher standards to fix it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've worked in Glenview and in Deerfield, and we sort of faced the same thing during the tear down rebuild scenario. Really the critical one is we've placed pretty heavy patch details that we hold them to. We hold them accountable. Whenever they do work in the road, they have to get out of the road within a short period of time. Typically it's 72 hours. And if they're not out within that period of time, there's a minimum of a $5,000 fine for leaving plates and stuff out there. So it's pretty robust. They respond quickly, so they provide the least amount of impact to our residents and people riding with bikes and things like that. The detail that we usually require them is to go substantially deeper than our roadway that's there right now. So if a road is 4 inches thick, they have to go an additional few inches down as they build up. The hardest part is anytime you put asphalt down, asphalt's probably the most significant one because you can see it clearly, is that when you put it down uniformly, it's nice, everything's locked up nice and clean. And then when they cut a patch, it's never the exact same material that you used. So we can take a look at the materials. We specify the same material that we use, but depending on where they get it from, that's the hard part. The other option that we look at is, do we make the patches that they put in larger? So they're not, you don't have 3 bullet holes where there could be one larger patch. I know that's something we can consider and take a look at. We definitely don't want to provide we don't want to provide a fiscal hurt to our builders in town by having them replace large sections unnecessarily, but we can take a look at it, and we often do recommend trying to keep the patches as close together as you possibly can to minimize that.
Yeah.
Is there a retrospective? I mean, do you have like a 6-month window where, if it's a poor quality patch job, it becomes apparent that they're held accountable for that?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. Typically for the places that wind up doing the patches in the roadway, they're usually installing their utilities early on in, let's say, a reconstruction project. And that project typically won't close out for another 8 months to a year, depending on the type of construction they're doing. So we have inspectors that go out there constantly, and we keep tabs on it. And if we note that it's falling, we get the contractor to come back before we close up the DOs.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Otherwise, it just costs us more money to fix it again more quickly than we'd have to. So we shouldn't bear the cost that the builder, the resident who's doing the work.
Sure.
Well, my recollection is that was one of the main arguments for going to home rule, was that we would have more authority over, construction jobs and stuff like that. So go raw. Thanks.
Sure.
One thing I might want to mention on that issue is some municipalities, including the city of Chicago, simply charge as part of their street opening permit patch, and it's done with their own crews, their own contractors and the like, which would give us a lot more control. Jim, I guarantee you're getting driveway mix and half of those patches on the street.
Yep.
And that's why they end up deteriorating so fast. Nobody's using state spec material on those little patches. Getting the plants to fire up to give them a yard or two is next to impossible. And and we're never out there when they do it, so we can't even look at the load tickets. So might be something to consider if it's, of course, we've been through the worst of it now, but
Well, it's going to be an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
or maybe
we actually used to internally. Oh, sorry. We actually used to do the patches internally, where, as Chris, as you mentioned, we used to pay, the developer used to pay a fee, and then our crews would go out and do the patch. The problem was based on the manpower and available staff that we had, we couldn't keep up. And so we wound up putting cold patch in, and it took a while. And so we actually got away from it for that reason, actually not that long ago. But it's something that we can take a look at again, and if we think we need to revise it.
Or doing that as part of the annual street maintenance, is that going in and fixing all of those, they might put in whatever crud they put in, but doing it right as part of, and then charging for it. I don't know.
That's not a bad idea, Penny.
Yeah.
Hey.
Difference between in-house versus contracting out for the repair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Say, Jim, in the, and I know we talked about this last year, and I think we did something about it, but in the interest of trying to build up flexible reserves for future projects, we recategorized certain projects and had them financed by the motor fuel tax fund. Last year, I believe, Steve may remember that. And, that's the fund balance that my recollection is that we have sort of the least flexibility if we wanted to use other funds for other purposes and so on, that the motor fuel tax is pretty restricted. But it seems to me that we should look for additional projects that might fit under that funding source. We did 900,000 last year. We're talking about 500,000 this year. I mean, can't we figure out a way or look at some of our projects and justify having them paid from that fund balance so that we aren't diminishing our other fund balances where we have more flexibility for use of those monies?
Sure. So I can anticipate a few large projects that will be coming up that we can actually utilize those MFT funds for. One of them would be the reconstruction of Willow Road. The village received an STP grant of a little over a couple $1 million that, as part of and in coordination with the larger stormwater project, we could look to use as the village's portion, part of those funds to cover those costs. We're going to be reconstructing in the very near future the Elm Street Bridge that goes over. So similar to the Oak and Cherry Street Bridge, we can utilize those funds for the design, resident engineering, and construction costs. And then, of course, there's always Hubbard Woods. That's a potential future streetscape location, potential JT, a larger reconstruction project where the state may ask us to contribute a little bit. That could be another funding source that could go through that pretty quickly.
Well, how about something for 2021?
Well,
So 2021, we're actually going to be resurfacing. We proposed 300,000 in this year's budget, similar to what we did last year, and that'll go for the reconstruction of Birch. That's where we're going to be replacing the water main as part of the street rehab, but we're going to be submitting Birch reconstruction as a separate project to the state, and utilizing those MFT funds for that.
And to clarify too, last year we had, the plan was we had identified some parking lots that we were going to use motor fuel tax for. And when it came time to do the project this year, we learned that the state was pretty restrictive even on the type of parking lot, that the parking lot had to be free to the public. You couldn't charge any type of user fee to be able to use motor fuel tax fund. So we did dedicate the money that we were going to use for the parking lot towards the annual street rehabilitation program. And as Jim says, we have 300,000 for street rehab this year, and then $200,000 identified for 2022 to 2025. So this total 5-year plan of $1.1 million in street resurfacing that in prior years would have come out of the general fund. But there is, Trustee Dearborn, you are correct, there is capacity as those projects that Jim mentioned get more numbers rounded out to get them slotted in to the 5-year plan.
So Tim, is there anything else in the 21 capital plan that could be warranted to be financed by the motor fuel tax fund or not? I mean, we've got other projects going through engineering. I mean, can any of those projects be allocated in part or whole to that fund? I mean, that fund is, the excess fund. I mean, I realize that we have other projects coming down the pike, but we've got $3 million of excess reserves in a fund that is very restrictive for us. And to the extent that we could justify or, put in for reimbursement from that fund, I think it would be helpful. I mean, we'll get into it with stormwater, but we're already looking at somewhat of a, unfunded balance for stormwater. So to the extent that we can, free up other capital, we should try to do it.
Sure. I mean, we can look as we get through 2021 as a somewhat of an anomaly as we didn't finish work from last year. But I think as we start to move into 2022, what I'll do is I'll take a look at our road resurfacing program and see if we can expand upon the number of street locations and really try to tap into that a little bit more to minimize any draw from the general. We could take a look at that. I we'd be open for that. And again, the bridge project for Elm Street will be following closely behind that. And those are going to be a couple big ticket items as well.
What are those estimated costs, Jim, for the bridge project on Elm Street?
I don't have that. I don't have that right now. It would probably be slightly more than what we paid for Oak. So you're looking at a little over $1 million, million and a half. Roughly.
I guess my only point on this is that when I look at the different fund balances and you say, well, what so-and-so fund is way overfunded. Well, we might use that. That's village, sanitary sewer fund is 800,000 surplus, but we could see using that and so on. But that motor fuel tax fund being 3.1 million, in excess capacity, surplus funding, surplus funds in that particular one. That's the one that we should try to use where we can to free up capital for what we know is, another initiative.
Sure. We can look for some opportunities to do that for sure.
And I don't know, Rob, if that's part of it, or Tim, if that's, even if it's a matter of sort of massaging the 5-year capital plan, we should look at that.
Yeah, we can look at that. I think we can work with Jim and see what we can do with that rehab number or some other numbers.
I mean, that's the fund balance that, I'd prefer seeing down to, slightly over the requirement versus the others.
Sure. We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I really think in the beginning next year, looking at, as Jim said, the road rehab program to see what percentage we can allocate from MFT to the street program, Jim.
Yeah.
I know we were a little worried about the revenue hit this year, but I think going forward that fund should rebalance itself, especially with the increased allocation from the state that we started to see materialize this past fiscal year, the year before.
Well, what happens when they deny it, Tim? I mean, you say you think it was a little more restrictive. I mean, you submit it, they say no, what happens?
They ask you to seek an alternative project. Yeah. There's certain categories that are listed under MFT approved projects, typical roadway constructions. There's certain things like roadway light costs they won't cover, concrete work, reconstruction, some utility work, but it depends on where it's located at. There's a whole category. Some people use it for purchase of materials such as salt, but it's what you have to consider is how the project then gets bid. Because remember, when you bid the project, such as an MFT project, and let's say we decided to take next year's street resurfacing program, and we spent 1.5 million of MFT funds on roadway. Let's just use that as an example. You have to go through the state process. There's certain ways you have to maintain your documentation, but the results of it come out of your hands. So when you bid it, whoever the lowest is, you have to accept the lowest. It's not home rule where you're like, you know what, that guy worked for us and we don't want him to do this project. You lose that control. You're now going through the state, and then you're kind of restricted to how you can bid that process and how you have to award it and things like that. So there's some additional steps that make it a little bit more difficult, especially when you're doing a larger project.
And these funds are legally separate. They're maintained in their own bank account. The state requires its own bank account. They will come and do a separate audit, although they're, whether that audit comes in 1 year or 10 years or 15 years, you don't know, because they are behind with all the villages in terms of auditing.
But you gotta be ready.
But that's, and if you don't use the money, they could potentially say, well, if you use it for wrong purposes, then they could claw it back.
Well, again, in case, they're listening down in Springfield, I'm not advocating, doing something untoward here. I'm just saying that to the extent we have some flexibility on this fund, we should use it.
Sure.
Yes.
The
That's all.
critical part with MFT is you have to bid it through the state. Everything has to go through the state. So they have to approve the product, the purchase, whatever it is, the product that's MFT eligible, it has to go through them. So their folks review it and they have to approve it before it goes bid. And then it gets led on this, it gets the project or the purchase or whatever, gets done through the state bidding process. So then whoever gets it, gets it. That's kind of how it goes with that.
Well, then we should identify projects that we are less sensitive to who the, the project manager is or whatever.
Sure, sure.
That's all.
Okay. Jim, I'm really looking forward to your leadership in this new department. You are going to have your hands full with stormwater once that starts. It doesn't
Into
seem
the
like a
fight.
lot is on the plate right now, but trust me, you are going to be at ground zero for years to come, just holding on to this thing and navigating all of the various coordinational and financial issues that have to go. So it's good that you've been involved with this on the ramp up, because boy, oh boy, hold on to your hats. It's coming, and it's coming fast. So
Isn't it what they call the hot seat, Chris?
oh, it's going to be hot. So enjoy this small and uncontested budget while you have it. So
It's a nice pep talk, Chris.
You're trying to give an ulcer?
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
he knows what he's getting into. So thanks, Jim. Good job.
Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
Okay, I'll tell you what, guys. It's 9 o'clock. We can get David started if you want.
Can we put
We've
it
ran
off?
for 2 hours already, and these are some pretty meaty budgets. I mean,
I'd prefer to be fresh to talk about community development. There's a lot to talk about there. If that's okay, that's my proposal.
other thoughts?
So that would fit into the 19th, Chris?
Yeah.
I'm open either way.
Me too.
It looks like there's not very many pages to go over according to the.
But there's a lot
schedule.
to talk about, isn't there? There's a comprehensive plan and all that kind of stuff. I don't know.
There's a lot of meaty topics there that'll probably engender some conversation. So
Okay.
I just look at, if you want to forge on, I'll be happy to do it. But
What does that leave for the next meeting?
Well, the next budget meeting is Thursday, the 19th. We're going back to the list for next Tuesday. It looks like it might lighten up a little bit. So it's possible for Tuesday, or it's certainly the fallback would be Thursday.
that's a good point. We can look at the list for next Tuesday is pretty light. We can probably buzz through that business in relatively short order. We're not going to hear the applicant for the Green Bay condominium project until December, so that'll free us up quite a bit, and so we can just bring David in after that, and still probably be only 30 to 45 minutes into the meeting.
I
Is the
moved
Green Bay- is
that.
that the Walden project that was on the agenda or tentative
Yeah, that's
agenda?
not. We're not hearing him in November. There's just no way.
David, are you good for potentially next Tuesday?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Sorry you had to wait through all this.
So we're all okay with that?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right. Well, that does it then, folks. Do I have to do a formal dismissal, or what do they call it?
Yes, we need
Adjournment?
you need a motion to adjourn, and I need to call the roll.
So moved.
We'll do that.
Second.
Motion to adjourn?
I got it from Trustee Apatow, second from Trustee Dearborn. Trustee Apatow,
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
Trustee Swart,
Yes.
Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
Trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
Trustee Lanfair.
Sure thing.
Okay, gang, we'll see you all
Tuesday.
Thank
Tuesday.
you very much. Good
Night.
night.